What is going on, guys? My name is John and welcome back to yet another video. So if you've been subbed to my channel or watched enough of my Twitch streams, you know that I've played a lot of Pokemon. I mean, literally the first gaming franchise I was ever introduced to as a kid was Pokemon, and since then I don't think I've missed a single week where I haven't played at least one of the mainline games. Aside from the Generation 4 games, I'm pretty sure I've played Red, Blue, Yellow, and the remakes, more than all the other generations combined, so it's fair to say that I have a pretty solid grasp of the Kanto region. I mean, basically half of the videos on this channel are based around Gen 1, I'm a top 400 speedrunner for Red and Blue, and I've completed the Pokedex in Red more times than I can count, so why not take a test to just see how well I really know these games. Today we're going to find out how easy you can beat Pokemon Red and Blue blindfolded. So this entire idea stemmed from my time streaming on Twitch, which if you haven't checked out already, my chat can attest that it's a super fun time.
I'm sorry, stop withdrawing. I'm not a bank! Stop! Oh, come on!
I'm a big fan of Nuzlockes, and it's fair to say that I'm not very good at them, so naturally I'm seen in a completely different light over there in comparison to the content that I normally upload on this channel. With that being said, I decided what's a better way to prove that I'm good at a game I've wasted my entire life on than showing chat just how much I've wasted my entire life playing this game. The concept for this is very simple. From the introduction with Professor Oak to when I defeat the champion in Pokemon Blue, I'm going to attempt to beat the game completely blindfolded. At no point can I peek, and I made sure to prove before each stream that my blindfold didn't have any pinholes or was thin enough to see through. As a result, I just had to figure out where I was in the game strictly off of game sense. However, I did give my chat an option to participate. I made it so if a viewer donated a certain amount of money, their donation would be read out loud to me, but I prefaced beforehand that they can't just tell me exactly what to do or where I was, as that would obviously defeat the entire purpose of the challenge. Now, this may sound like it might give me an unfair advantage, but if you know anything about my chat, they aren't exactly the helpful type.
You know, I have feelings, right? You guys know that?
Before we get into the video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more content like this. Roughly only 40% of the people that watch my videos are actually subscribed, and you can always change your mind down the road if you don't like my content. With all that out of the way, let's just jump right into it. So as most of you know, the beginning of the game is relatively straightforward, as we basically just have to mash the A button to get through the entire intro. However, I tried my best to name my character after myself. I somehow was able to get the first two letters right, and then nosedive straight into naming myself Jamu, so if that doesn't set the tone for this challenge, you'll understand a lot better later on. Starting out in our room, I decided to grab the PC potion to ensure that I have at least something to heal, which now adds another thing that I'll have to keep track of while I'm playing the game. Because there are multiple items, TMs, and key items that will have to be used, I'm basically forced to keep track of what I have, as well as what I'll use throughout the entire challenge so I don't get stuck. After struggling to find the table of Pokemon, I eventually picked Squirtle and tried to name Monkey, which I ended up with, well, I'm not really sure about that one. Because I've done speedruns of this game before, I had a pretty solid idea of what Squirtle's moveset is, and although the rival battle may not seem that important considering that the game will progress whether you win or lose, this is great practice to learn all the sounds for the moves that I currently have. This way I'll know if I land the correct move, and I could potentially figure out over time what move is used against me. From here, my luck started to get a little bit better as I managed to get through Route 1 without encountering a single Pokemon, and I managed to accidentally walk through the one-block gap leading to Viridian City while I was trying to explain how frustrating that part was going to be. This actually made it relatively hard to find the Pokemon Center, but after healing up, I was able to grab the parcel and make my way back down to Pallet Town to get the Pokedex again. Heading north of the city leads us to Viridian Forest, which may pose a threat considering that there are multiple fights here that have high potential to poison us. Thankfully though, I knew there were two antidotes available here, so I made sure to show off a little bit of my game sense.
All right, I'm gonna try and get the tree. I'm gonna get that tree. Is it an antidote in the tree? I think. I'm gonna try. That's too far. Are you the tree? You're the tree! I'm a gamer, dude. Oh my god.
To my surprise, the first few actual trainer fights in this game weren't as difficult as I imagined. But to be fair, the beginning of every Pokemon game is just pressing A, so I'm pretty confident that anyone could really do this. I did end up learning Bubble halfway through the forest, which is realistically our only way of taking down the first gym leader. Although I did get poisoned on the last trainer, I decided to gun it for the Pewter City Pokemon Center after failing to heal my Pokemon for about 10 minutes. As most of you know, the first gym in these games is really only a challenge if you start the game with Charmander, and considering that we're at a decent level, it's pretty difficult to have any sort of trouble with our opponents. Although I only had 12 HP left after taking on the only other trainer in the gym, I decided to test out Brock to see if I could clutch it out. Bubble nearly one-shot Geodude and Onix, and because Geodude missed its tackle, I was able to claim the first badge without even taking any damage. I know making this sound like it's really easy, but now is the time where the game starts to get really difficult. Now, I'm sure the biggest question you're asking at this point is, how does he know where he's supposed to be in the game? And I guess the honest answer is that I don't. It's really one of those things where you have to just close your eyes and imagine each location yourself. Like I mentioned earlier, I've played these games enough to have a pretty solid idea as to where each trainer is located, and the only real way I can tell where I'm going is by listening to the sound cues in the game. Obviously, the confirmation ding noise that plays when you select and scroll through text boxes gives you a general idea, but the key thing that I focus on is the route music changing and the classic noise when you bump into a wall. Although these tips can help out a lot, there are a ton of other really specific things that you don't consider that we'll talk about in a bit. After taking down the first trainer on Route 3, I managed to save the game, which not only saves me from beating the game in one sitting, but it's also the start to better understanding the menu screen if I ever have to switch a Pokemon around or heal. After taking on nearly every trainer on Route 3, I'd attempted to catch a Spearow, only to realize 5 minutes into battle that I never got any Pokeballs, so I made my way back to the end of the route to enter Mount Moon. Oddly enough, out of the entire game, this is the location where I was the most confident in my knowledge of the game. Because I had to spend so much time learning the Mount Moon manip in this game when I did the speedruns, this entire area is ingrained into my mind. There are really only a few times where I didn't walk exactly where I wanted to, but I was able to quickly recover from that and make my way to the exit. It's important to know that regardless of how good I am at getting through this section, there is always room for my brain not to function.
I should be in, like, what, torrent range now, right?
Lord Dome is to the right.
Suck it.
John, that's the second time you've asked about Torrent. You're in Gen 1. There are now abilities.
You're right. You're right.
After exiting the mountain, I had my first real issue with my memory that will become a lot more prevalent as I progress further into the game. I figured that the Mega Punch TM would be super clutch, as you're supposed to do it anyways if you're speedrunning the game, so I tried to find the two karate guys that give you the TMs for Mega Punch and Mega Kick west of Cerulean City. The only issue is that I already got that TM in Mount Moon like 15 minutes ago, and those trainers are only in the remakes Fire Red and Leaf Green. Although this time I messed up something that was optional, there are many very small differences in the remakes of these games that could potentially mess me up as I progress. After trying to evolve Wartortle with a Moonstone about 8 times, I was eventually able to teach Wartortle Mega Punch to make the next few battles a little bit easier. Although the Cerulean City rival battle is normally pretty difficult to solo, I managed to get a crit Mega Punch on Bulbasaur, which saved me from having to find my way back to that area. From here I was able to take on the Nugget Bridge, and to no surprise it was pretty straightforward, however there were for sure some very interesting moments.
What? Did I break the game? It's 2 knockouts. It's fine though. It's fine. We'll run it back. We'll run it back. I won't let you down. That's muscle memory, baby. That's muscle memory.
One issue that I came across in this point in the game was dealing with learning new moves. This ended up taking a lot of trial and error because I didn't know Squirtle's entire moveset history, as well as the fact that there just aren't any sound cues that let me know if I choose to not cancel the move. I settled on just pressing A and B over and over until it eventually got me out of the menu. Although Bite could be helpful later on, it's a lot easier to remember the moves that I have now rather than add a random one and figure out later if it was actually worth having. Bill's house is up next, and unfortunately this is another one of those situations where I imagine the area to be like Fire Red and Leaf Green, although that's really the least of my concerns. So in order to get the SS ticket, you have to talk to Bill, activate the computer, and then talk to him again to receive the item. Sounds easy, right? The catch is if you leave before completing all that, it'll reset the event, and considering that it took me 10 minutes just to find Bill, you best believe that completing this event took longer than it did to beat literally the entirety of Mount Moon. To finish up this area, the only thing we have left to do is take on Misty's gym. Because I had no idea what my HP was at, I decided to just run into this battle because I assumed I outleveled her team. Unfortunately, I only had 16 HP, but I did manage to take out Staryu in one hit, which told me that I definitely would have this in the bag if I was fully prepared. One other big issue that I came across is that when my Pokemon's HP is in the red, the dinging noise overrides every other sound aside from the attacking and fainting sounds, which means that if I get lost in a menu, I'll have zero idea what to do if I miss input. On the second attempt, I just spammed Mega Punch and I was able to take down Staryu and Starmie, and on the first day of streaming this challenge, I had successfully completed 2 gyms in a little over 2 hours of playing. Even though I made a lot of progress on the first day, I knew that I'd already completed a majority of the things that I was confident that I could get through, so the game was only going to get a lot harder. On the second day, I made my way out of Cerulean City with the confidence that I could make some more decent progress that day, but it was very apparent that I still had a lot to learn before I could come even close to becoming the champion.
Are you a person? Tree.
The first big challenge for the day was the SS Anne, and although this is a pretty large location, the path to get what you need is extremely linear. There is a rival battle right at the end, however, just like last time, Wartortle is high enough level to make it through just fine. I will say that I did get extremely lucky because Ivysaur did basically nothing the entire battle, so I'm sure if I got hit just once it would have changed the entire battle.
Oh no, now I have to catch a Pokemon. Oh, this is gonna not be fun. Oh no! How am I gonna do that?
This little realization opens up a big list of issues that I have to figure out right now. How am I going to buy balls? Can I even catch a Pokemon? And how am I even going to use the move when it comes time? I had a pretty decent mental image of what the shops look like with the list of items, but I didn't end up getting one single Pokeball and a Super Potion, which drained out a huge chunk of the very limited money that I had to begin with. After spending a little time in the grass, I was able to encounter a measly Bellsprout, which I knew could learn the HM, and despite only having one ball, I managed to catch it.
Oh, I have a good name. This is gonna take so much brain power. Okay. C. J. L. M. N. O. N. M. L. A for conch? Did I name it conch? I might have totally butchered that though.
Now, although this is super cool and I actually managed to name it exactly how I wanted to, I'm sorry to disappoint, but every other name will be borderline unreadable. The next big hurdle was teaching Cut to Conch, and this is another one of those moments where it's extremely difficult to figure out when you can select your Pokemon because everything makes the exact same sound. I ended up getting completely confused and taught Wartortle Dig over Mega Punch, which initially I thought was bad because I needed Cut, but realistically it wasn't the worst thing considering that's our only counter to taking down the next gym. After about 10 minutes, I was able to teach Bellsprout the right move, which leads us to the final issue, actually using the move. Now, unlike the newer games where you just have to interact with the tree that you want to cut, in the first gen games you have to go into the menu you use cut, which adds a completely different layer of difficulty since I won't know things like if I'm actually facing the tree properly. The greatest issue for this was that I thought that the tree was flush with the fencing outside the gym, but once again that was only in Fire Red Leaf Green. But eventually I was able to chop it down and move on to the next gym. Lieutenant Surge's gym is arguably one of the most unique parts of this challenge, mostly for one reason: the trash cans. If you're unaware, the puzzle for this gym is that you have to interact with the trash cans and flip 2 switches. The catch is that if you don't immediately find the second switch after finding the first one, the cans re-randomize themselves. Even without a blindfold, this can be really annoying, but there are a few tricks that you can take advantage of to better your chances. The most important thing is that the first switch is only available in a checkered pattern. This means that starting from the corner, the cans will flip between potentially having a switch and 0 chance of having one. This narrows down half of the results, and although this isn't completely true, your best chance in red and blue of finding a second switch is to just check one that's next to it. Some are guaranteed to be in a certain place, but at the time I didn't know the exact locations, so I was just blindly guessing. No pun intended. The real issue with this gym is actually interacting with the trash cans. For some reason, if you interact with the first trash can and it doesn't contain any trash, the game will not make any noise to confirm that you're interacting with it. This may not seem like a big issue, but this means that if you lose your sense of direction, you'll have 0 idea if you're talking to a wall, NPC, trash can, or just air. This was easily the largest hurdle that I had to jump through, as I already didn't have really the greatest mental image of this gym, but eventually I was able to get the hang of it.
Okay, so I found another one. I think, I'm just gonna do the one next to me. Yes! I'm a gamer! Let's go! Okay!
Although it did take basically half an hour to get to this area, I managed to unlock the trash cans on my second try, which is arguably better than any of the times I've had to do it with actually looking at the game. When it came time to fight Lieutenant Surge, I kind of forgot that I was leading with Bellsprout so I can access the gym easier, but I was able to make my first in-battle switch into Wartortle to deal more damage. Although at the time teaching Dig seemed like a big mistake, I'm pretty sure I was going to have to do that anyways. Somehow I ended up eating a Thunderbolt from Raichu when with a single dig I'd claimed the 3rd badge in this challenge. I personally thought this was going to take a lot longer to get through because of my obvious weakness, but with that out of the way, it's time to make our way into the largest portion of the map. After heading into Route 9, I realized I had the ability to get the bicycle now, however that did require me going all the way back to Vermilion City to get the voucher from the president of the fan club, which was surprisingly the easy part. Getting the bike voucher on the other hand...
That's not right. It's such a small part of the game. How can I possibly remember something like that? Great. Weird. And now I'm really lost. Although this looks really linear, there are a lot of little locations where you can get stuck in, as well as the fact that you can only enter this place once the entire game, which makes it nearly impossible to remember the layout. Eventually I was able to figure out where the clerk was, and I decided to take it a step further to make this item actually useful. Because it'd be nearly impossible to rummage through my bag to find my bike later on in the game, I swapped it with the antidotes at the top of my bag. That way if I ever needed to use it, I would only have to scroll to the top of my bag to use it. After bonking my way through the rest of Route 9, it's time to take on the next cave section, the rock tunnel. Now, just like Mount Moon, I practiced this section quite a lot, so although I could sense that my chat thought I was going to be here for the next few days, I figured I should compensate for the last few mistakes I made by showing off some real skill. Believe it or not, I basically got through this whole area without really making any mistakes. Right at the last trainer, I didn't have enough HP to take down Oddish, but thankfully I didn't have to worry about any additional battles on the way back, so I was able to get through this section in a little over half an hour. It's unfortunate that I couldn't get through it on the first try, but to be honest, I got through this location faster than I expected. Now that I've reached Lavender Town, I'm able to be a little bit more free in my storyline decisions. After a couple of battles, I managed to make it to Celadon City, and because I spent so much time at the Vermilion City events in the Rock Tunnel, I decided to call it a day and come back the next day to take on a bunch more tasks. On day 3, I had a pretty solid plan for the day, and knowing that I had some potentially very difficult sections to get through, I had a few tricks up my sleeve to help get through it all. The first order of business was buying some stuff from the Celadon department store. I needed to get a drink from the rooftop so I could give it to one of the Saffron guards, and fortunately it was pretty easy figuring out how the elevator works as well as getting the actual item. As most of you know, the next section that you're intended to take on is the Rocket Underground. This location contains a ton of twist and turn puzzles that would be unbelievably frustrating to get through, and I knew from the start that I would take an absurd amount of time to get through that. I decided that the best play would be to do a neat trick and completely bypass that entire section by grabbing the Pokédoll on the 4th floor. If you didn't know, although in the remakes you have to collect the Sylph Scope from Giovanni in the underground to battle the Marowak in the Pokemon Tower, in these games, as long as you can complete the battle, the game will let you progress. This is a pretty big oversight in the game's mechanics, and I know people will definitely consider this cheating, but to be fair, I am playing the game entirely blindfolded. I'm going to take advantage of every opportunity I can to make it easier. I knew the item was with the evolution stones, so I took a bit of time narrowing down each floor to figure out exactly where I could buy the item. Thankfully, I bought it on the first try, which will definitely save presumably an entire stream from becoming me spinning in circles for hours. After leaving the city, I was able to give the guard the drink to allow me into Saffron City, but I realized that there was one more thing I could do in the city that could be somewhat helpful. I went to grab the gift Evie in the backdoor building, and although it's not a high level, it is a free Pokemon that I could use as a Sackmon to potentially heal Wartortle if I needed it. Speaking of that, I ran into an extra battle on the way to the next location, which ended up allowing Wartortle to evolve into Blastoise, which will definitely make the rest of the future battles a lot easier to manage. After that, I made my way back to Lavender Town to take on the next event. The Lavender Tower contains a few important tasks that we're going to need to address, starting out with the rival battle on the 2nd floor. To no surprise, this was extremely easy because I knew I was like 10 levels above this entire team, so this took all of 5 minutes to get through. As for the rest of the tower, I was kinda confident about how to get through here, but at the same time, I knew this area had a lot of twists and turns that aren't that easy to remember. For starters, on the 4th floor, I completely forgot how the stairs worked and started going down the tower, which obviously wasted a ton of time, but this also ruined basically any chance of me knowing exactly what floor I was on through my perspective. I decided to just use Dig and teleport back to the Pokemon Center to start over, which was a really smart choice because I was able to get back to my first attempt in only a few minutes. As for the rest of the tower, it wasn't really that difficult aside from getting stuck in a few places for a minute, but I eventually managed to reach the top of the tower. When it came time to take on the ghost of the tower, I had to make 100% sure it was the actual Pokemon because the battle doesn't sound any different from the other 800 ghosts that I'd encountered previously in the tower, but with a little trial and error, I was able to use the Pokédoll to finish the battle. From here, there are a few more required battles against Team Rocket Grunts, and although I knew I had a pretty solid HP because of the healing pad on the previous floor, a lot of the trainers love to spam Confuse Ray, and with my luck, they were able to knock Blastoise out. Somehow Conk and Evie were able to take it down, however I knew that I couldn't take on the rest of the grunts alone. Now you're probably thinking, well John, you should probably use Dig again and scale the tower, and although it does take a lot of time, it's easily the best option considering that you've almost done it twice at this point. For some reason in my small brain I figured that that would have taken too long, so the better option was to go down 2 floors to the healing pad. On paper that sounds like a smart idea because it's faster, but that requires me to remember the floors in reverse. This is definitely one of those things that doesn't sound too difficult, but you have to remember that I'm blindfolded and it's significantly easier to replay a motion in your head if you've seen it 1,000 times beforehand. But since you're normally teleported out of this area when you defeat all the grunts, it might as well be a completely different map. Without boring you to death, getting to the healing floor and going back took nearly half an hour to do, which is almost the same amount of time it took me to scale the entire tower the first time. After clearing out the grunts, we can save Mr. Fuji and obtain the Poke Flute, which allows us to venture into the southern locations of the map. This obviously requires us to wake the Snorlax on either side of the map, and although this could be somewhat useful, its catch rate is way too low to bother spending time on when I know that there are much better Pokemon available further into the game. On the bike path, I managed to pull off another speedrun trick and get the rare candy hidden in the grass, but aside from that, I made a straight shot to Fuchsia City to take on the next few big tasks. Because I was pretty confident in my team, I decided to head straight to Koga's Gym and try and get another badge. I knew in advance that this gym would have been a lot easier if I grabbed the HM for Surf in the Safari Zone beforehand for Blastoise, but at the same time I knew that I was at a pretty high level, so I figured it was worth testing the waters to see how far I could actually take it. It's also important to note that I still have Dig, and because there aren't any abilities in this game, all the poison types in this gym don't stand a chance. When it came time to take on Koga, I really only had the game plan of spamming that one move, and to my surprise, it worked out pretty well. I was able to one-shot Coughing, but I got hit with Sludge by Muck, which brought me down to 20 HP. I ended up also taking that down and the next Coughing without a problem, but taking down Wheezing seemed impossible knowing its moveset. I was able to get off an initial Dig to chip away at its health, and it ended up missing Smog, which allowed me to use Dig again to eventually win the battle. On my end, all I was doing was spamming A through the red bar beeping over and over, but thanks to a little luck, I was able to claim another badge. Although this was nearly not as productive as the previous day, I knew that I had made enough progress to really start making a dent in this challenge. On the 4th day, I had a really solid game plan for getting through everything, starting off with collecting the remaining HMs that I needed in this area. After leaving the gym, I headed straight for the Safari Zone, which at the time I was confident in completing, but I also knew that there were a few complications that would definitely come up at some point in this quest. The first issue is the step counter. If you know your way around the Safari Zone, you have a pretty decent amount of extra steps, so even if you mess up and go the wrong way, you can recover and make it to the end without having to restart your expedition. Although I know the map really well, I knew this was going to be the greatest challenge due to the excessive bonking and retracing of my steps that I've been doing for the past 3 days. Oddly enough, the most difficult part of this section was not realizing that this plateau was on the map. And it wasn't even one of those fire red leaf green situations again, because the maps are almost identical in that way, but I was stuck here for nearly 15 minutes because I couldn't just understand why it wasn't a straight shot to the right of this area. I realized much later on that it was because I was mentally merging the second and third areas because they're somewhat similar in the path that you have to take, but naturally I ran out of steps after walking for about 20 minutes. On the second attempt, I was able to get through it as smoothly as a blindfolded person could, and I collected the HM for Surf from the secret house. The only thing remaining to get here are the gold teeth, and although it's very close by to this area, I didn't know the exact tile placement for it. I decided to just walk on every tile until I bumped, which was a risky idea, but guaranteed to work eventually. I ended up collecting them with only 24 steps to spare, so I'm sure this would have taken another 30 minutes minimum if I wasn't careful with my movement. With this, I was able to give them back to the Warden to get the HM for Strength, to which I then realized that there were too many moves I needed to teach Blastoise now, so I needed to find a way to not only overwrite my good moves, but remember the placements on my team. I made my way east of the city to Route 15 to get in some battles. Fortunately, just like the items in your bag, you can press select to rearrange your moves to any order that you want. I ended up moving the move I wanted to swap to the first slot, that way I can go into my bag and spam A and eventually teach the move to Blastoise without having to worry about getting rid of any of the really good moves that aren't HMs. This process took quite a bit of time, but I was successfully able to teach Surf and Strength, as well as rearrange the moves to my liking to make them easier to remember. The next big event is the one that my chat assumed was going to take forever, the Silphco. This building to the untrained eye looks like 11 floors of sheer pain, but fortunately I learned from the older catch-em-alls that it's really not as bad as it seems. Although there are tons of grunts that can be fought in this area, you really only have to fight a few of them to get to Giovanni. This obviously is still a pretty annoying task considering I had to find the elevator locations as well as how to tell which floor I'm on, but this really isn't as hard as you think it would be. To be fair, I did get lost a few times when I thought I went into the stairs thinking it was the elevator, but after only 20 minutes I was able to take on my rival. In my head I knew that Blastoise was a pretty high level, but I knew this was going to get to the point where the battles probably won't be very easy to beat with only one Pokemon. The major threats are really just Gyarados' Dragon Rage and Venusaur's Razor Leaf because I can realistically only live like 2 hits from those. I managed to get a crit dig, which dealt massive damage, to which Venusaur used Leech Seed, which gave me a free pass to just knock it out. I'm pretty sure if you used Razor Leaf at any point in this battle, I could have been one-shot because of the high critical hit ratio, but thankfully I was able to get through this on the first try. After this, we have a battle against Giovanni, which is substantially easier to get through because of my type advantages, but despite knowing how to beat this entire section, I somehow completely forgot some of the members of his team, which definitely made this take a lot longer than it should. Is that, what is that? Let me make the sound again. Don't make fun of me. What are you? I'm trying to think, what's on your team? What goes, That's not Rhydon. Rhydon's like, what is ow? After this battle, we obviously can collect the Master Ball, which is going to be the sole thing that will make this challenge infinitely easier to manage. I slowly made my way back to Cerulean City and went east toward the Rock Tunnel to make use of this item in the best way possible. The power plant obviously contains Zapdos, which is not only insanely strong and over-leveled compared to nearly every other opponent in the game, but it almost perfectly counters any Pokemon that could be of issue to Blastoise. Well, this is all well and good, it doesn't take away from the fact that we have to reach Zapdos, which is a completely different story. Once again, this is one of those locations where I haven't really gone here enough to have it chiseled into my brain, but I still obviously knew the general layout for the area. One of the most annoying areas is the container room. In my head, I knew you had to walk all the way to the right of the building and then up to get to the end, and conveniently this room is almost the same length as the other path. This made it nearly impossible to distinguish if I had the right area or not, and as a result, I was stuck here for literally 20 minutes just trying to find a way out of this room because I thought I was somewhere else. But to be honest, this wasn't even the most frustrating thing. The encounters were abysmal here. I don't really understand why, but I was finding Pokemon literally every 3 steps, which made this so much more difficult to remember where I was when I would just keep losing my place on the map by imagining a battle every time I heard the encounter theme. Although this whole area took only 30 minutes, at the time it felt like I was there for easily over an hour. Up until this point, this was the only time I was genuinely frustrated with the game because I knew I was like one step away from making the game so much easier for myself, but I couldn't visualize where I needed to go. When it came time to get Zapdos, I struggled to throw my Master Ball for a while because I was not only in red bar so I couldn't hear sounds, but I also grabbed a TM on my adventure through the building, and I forgot where the placement of the item was in my bag. Well, now that I'd spent nearly the entire stream doing 2 things, I figured it was time to make some real progress. I used Dig to get back to Saffron and decided to take on the gym leader while I was already here. Once again, Sabrina's gym might not seem like a fun time considering there's like 40 portals you can walk through, but thankfully I had to learn this for speedrunning. And if you just move diagonally twice and then down, you'll always end up in the final room. To no surprise, Zapdos absolutely demolishes her entire team, and I was able to defeat her in less than a minute because her team has 0 defenses against Drill Peck. From here, I walked to Celadon City to take on Erica's gym, and although it did take a bit of time to find the cut tree at the bottom of the city, the gym itself was absurdly easy to get through. Inside the gym, I was able to find the cut tree to access the center by counting the shrubs from the top of the map, which took less than a minute again to get myself orientated. As for the battle, Zapdos obviously mopped her team because I'm basically double her level at this point, and with that out of the way, I ended the day with 6 of the 8 badges, which meant there wasn't really much more to do in this challenge. However, I knew there were still some tough sections that had to be done. On the 5th day, I decided I was tired of walking and digging to get everywhere that I needed to go, so I figured, why not make it a little risky, and I went to get the Fly HM west to Celadon City. In my head, I had a general idea of how the Fly mechanics worked because I knew you always started in Pallet Town, and I figured that just through trial and error, I could figure out how many up or down presses I needed to do through listening to the music for whatever place I ended up landing at. Now, while this is great on paper, it's still apparent that my audio cue knowledge isn't as good as I thought it was. Okay, so Pokemon. So we have, let me remind myself, Zapdos, Paris, Bellsprout, Evie, Blastoise. I know Blastoise is last, so that's fine. I also know it's Dig, Surf, or Strength Surf. Well, that is a Pokedex, so that was not helpful at all. After making my way south of Palatown, I reached Cinnabar Island, and as you know, in order to be able to access the gym, we're going to need to grab the key from the basement of the Pokemon Mansion. Although I was really confident in my abilities to do that, I knew that there was going to be one issue that could potentially mess me up. My bag. See, in Generation 1, your bag has a limit to how many items it can hold, and while it's easy to throw things out, it's a huge pain when majority of those items in your bag can't be thrown away because they're special items. To make it so I knew I had at least one available slot, I went to the research lab to give the scientist Kabuto. I realized that Pokemon wasn't going to be useful at all, so I let him keep it forever as thanks for helping me out. As for the Pokemon Mansion itself, it really wasn't all that bad. Flipping the doors was a pretty big pain because I had to remember what locations were and weren't gated off, but aside from that, it wasn't that bad. On the flip side, I was completely correct about having too many items in my bag, and I had to figure out how to throw something out because I accidentally grabbed a TM that I thought was the secret key. After spending about 15 minutes in the mansion, I was able to get the item and use Dig to exit back to Cinnabar Island, or so I thought. I didn't heal in the Pokemon Center.
Man, Cinnabar Island changed a lot since you went into the mansion. It almost looks like Celadon.
After making it back to the island, I went to take on the 7th gym leader in the game. When it comes to taking on the puzzle before the leader, you have to answer a bunch of questions, and if you answer incorrectly, you're forced to face off against one of the trainers in the gym. This is another one of those things that I learned from speedrunning, so I was able to answer all the questions and get to the leader without any problems. As you can imagine, with Blastoise, Blaine's gym wasn't going to be much of an issue, but I found out after the battle that I only used Strength the entire battle rather than Surf because I still didn't remember the order that I swapped around for my moves. Thankfully, I lived a hit from Arcanine to be able to take it down, but I can guarantee you that this would have been completed a lot faster if I used literally any other move that Blastoise knew. Now that's out of the way, let's take on the final gym. Giovanni is going to be the last gym challenge for this game, and although this gym can be kind of tough to traverse through, I knew a trick to get to the leader with only having to fight against 2 of the trainers. If you fight the guy at the top of the room that walks down to block your path and then re-enter the gym, he'll move back to his original position, which allows you to skip the rest of the gym. While this is very simple when you're normally playing, I wasn't completely confident about doing this without seeing. One thing you want to avoid are the little spinner tiles to the left of us, but I think I'm fine. After messing around the bottom left of the gym for a while, I managed to pull off the trick and make it to Giovanni. Just like Blaine's gym, I had the coverage to completely wipe anything he had to throw at me, and thankfully I actually used Surf this time, which led to beating the final gym leader in a little over a minute. Now that I've collected every badge in the game, it's time for the final challenge. The Indigo Plateau. Before we're able to enter the badge checking gates, we have one last rival battle that needs to be taken care of. Once again, Zapdos and Blastoise were able to make easy work of literally every Pokemon on his team, but I could not for the life of me find Zapdos in the menu to switch into. So I messed around for a while and I was able to make a huge dent in Venusaur with Bellsprout, Evie, and Paris before I was able to swap into Zapdos to finish it off. After making my way through the confirmation gates, it's time for one last puzzle to get through. Victory Road. This location is confusing to get through normally, but you also have to consider that I need to do multiple strength boulder puzzles in order to get to the exit. Although this is another thing that I extensively practiced when I did speedrunning, my chat knew that I was still going to have a ton of trouble with this. And they weren't exactly wrong. Initially, I just activated strength when I entered the cave and tried to push the boulder around, but I realized that the moment I made contact with it, I was going to mess up the puzzle, so I decided to find the rock first before doing the HM to get a better idea of my surroundings. After completing the puzzle on the first floor, I realized that when the boulder is pushed into the circle pad, the game doesn't give you a sound cue as to when you've done it correctly. Thankfully, I knew the placement well enough for this one that I had done it properly, but I knew that the other ones were going to be a lot harder to figure out. For the second puzzle, I kept thinking that the small rock next to the pad was the boulder, and I accidentally pushed the actual one the wrong direction, but somehow I was able to recover from that and progress further to the third floor. This is where things went severely wrong. So the goal for this puzzle is to find the boulder and basically push it all the way to the left of the map and then onto the circle pad that's in a little bit of a maze. After failing this section hard one time during speedrunning, I knew the placement of the thing I needed to push, but actually completing the puzzle was completely absent in my head. After pushing the boulder all the way across, I actually ended up remembering the exact spot where the boulder needed to be, but I had no idea how to push it so it wouldn't get stuck in the process. I really can't express how much my brain wasn't working, but this puzzle alone took me 20 minutes to complete. Because this specific puzzle doesn't really require any thought when you're normally playing, my brain just never remembered the layout because it only takes like 15 seconds to complete. As for the rest of the area, I was able to solve the drop-down boulder puzzle through good old trial and error, and after over an hour, I managed to make it out the other side. I decided that mentally it was best to save the ending of this challenge for the next day so I could start it out with a fresh mindset. On day 6, I was ready to take on the members of the Elite Four. However, there were definitely a few small challenges that need to be completed in order for me to be able to take them on efficiently. The first thing I took care of was teaching Zapdos the TM for Thunderbolt. In my past challenges, I knew this was going to help me take down some big threats, so I did the same trick as I did last time, where I put the move I wanted to swap in the first slot, and then double checked with an encounter to make sure that it worked properly. The next thing I needed to do was clear my entire bag. With my current team, I have access to all the HMs that I'm going to need to finish the game, and this way I can purchase a set list of items which will make it nearly impossible to lose my place in my bag if I ever need to heal one of my Pokemon. While this is all well and good, buying the actual items I needed was a completely different story. So if I scroll all the way down, no, that doesn't seem right. The buying menu in these games is another instance of not having sound cues for every choice that you make, most importantly when the menu opens to show the list of items. Every time I would talk to the Mart Man, I would press A to what I assume would be a dialogue asking what do you want, when in reality the list automatically popped up and I was always selecting the first item in the menu. After a while I was able to purchase some revives, but for the life of me I couldn't find the hyper potions. This whole issue went on for a while as I tried to find alternatives like buying sodas from the Celadon Mart, but after some extreme testing and 5 individual purchases of singular Ultra Balls, I was able to get a whopping 11 hyper potions to get me through the rest of the game. Considering that I'm really only going to use 2 Pokemon, it's not all that bad, but I knew that if a battle ended up going on for too long, I was probably going to fail the entire challenge. The first member of the Elite Four that has to be challenged is Lorelei. I chose to lead with Zapdos and basically spam Thunderbolt on the first 3 Pokemon before swapping into Blastoise against Jinx to avoid any more ice moves. I ended up swapping back into Zapdos to take on Lapras and managed to tank a Blizzard before taking it down. I wish I had more to say about this battle, but it really wasn't that difficult to get through considering that Zapdos was really the only Pokemon who got damaged a decent amount. Next up is Bruno. As most of you know, this is easily the least difficult Elite Four member in the history of the Pokemon series, so I knew that as long as I made the proper switches, I would get through this fine. Because at the time I didn't know I got hit by a Blizzard, I went into the battle without healing, but after getting hit by the weakest Thunder Punch of all time, I managed to heal up Zapdos to basically run through the rest of the team with Drill Peck. During this battle, I also managed to teach Blastoise Hydro Pump over Water Gun, which gave me my strongest move to wipe out any Pokemon I knew that couldn't be taken down with Surf. Agatha is a third Elite Four member, and although Zapdos can definitely deal a ton of damage to it, the combination of Hypnosis, Confused Ray, and Dream Eater was going to be a tough battle to manage when I'm not completely sure what I'm being hit by. After taking down a few Pokemon, she ended up swapping into Arbok in the middle of the battle, which had never happened in the entirety of this challenge, so it took me a bit to realize what happened before making any more choices. Aside from that, the rest of the battle wasn't too difficult to get through, aside from hitting myself in confusion a couple times, but at this point I realized that I had been using my good moves way too many times. In addition, I had a few Sackmons get knocked out, as well as the rest of the team poisoned or heavily damaged, so I messed around with the item menu for a bit before reviving and healing everything that I needed to be taken care of. As for the poisoning, I didn't really have a choice other than wait for my Pokemon to faint because I didn't have any healing items for that, so I made my way to Lance to take on the final member of the Elite Four. Because this team resists basically all but 2 moves on my team, I knew this was going to be a tough fight, but I had a rough game plan as to how I was going to get through it. Gyarados was easy to take down because of Thunderbolt, but when it came time to take on the actual Dragon types, my only option for Zapdos was Drill Peck. Although Fly would do more, I wanted to avoid taking as much poison damage as possible, and I figured this was basically going to be the best option for making the greatest dent in his team. I ended up tanking a Hyper Beam from the second Dragonair, which helped me run through the first leg of his team in Aerodactyl, but his final Pokemon Dragonite was the actual challenge to this fight. I would imagine this as a quarter. Or maybe a third. Probably a third's a little bit more realistic. After losing Blastoise, I swapped into Zapdos to try and make a dent, but I got hit by yet another Hyper Beam, which left me with my Sack Pokemon. I ended up sending out Paris to heal Blastoise before getting knocked out, to which I then sent out Bellsprout to keep trying to heal. After surviving a turn, I figured I should just use Conk until it was knocked out, which was the greatest decision that I had ever made. Because the game's AI knew that I was poison typed, Dragonite tried to take me down with the only psychic moves it knew, Barrier and Agility. As a result, our savior Conk was not only able to bring it down to red health, but wrap it back down again after being healed. This has to be the pause champ of the... Yes. And with that, I have defeated Lance with a mere Bellsprout.
Lord Conk.
With the final Elite Four member taken down by arguably the strongest Pokemon to ever exist, there is only one more battle left to do in this challenge: the champion. I started this battle by one-shotting Pidgeot with a Thunderbolt, to which he then sent out Alakazam. Although he was able to get off a barrier, I was able to break through with a few Drill Packs to take that down as well. This led to having Rhydon sent out, and I was able to swap into Blastoise to one-shot it with Surf. I will note that I did dodge a Horn Drill, which would have 100% killed my chances of winning, but with 3 Pokemon already down, I was ready to finish this challenge. Zapdos was able to one-shot Gyarados with Thunderbolt just like earlier, and Blastoise was able to take down Arcanine with Surf to bring him down to his final Pokemon. In true gaming fashion, I was able to knock out Venusaur with a critical hit Drill Pack to secure my place in the Hall of Fame. And with that, I have successfully beat Pokemon Red and Blue completely blindfolded. But how did I do? So let's review. After registering myself in the Hall of Fame, I beat the game in 15 hours and 41 minutes, which was significantly better than I would have ever imagined. Obviously, I was able to take a guess as I went along just by how many streams that I did, but seeing the number was really an eye-opener as to how fast I was able to get through this challenge. Although I know I stressed out my chat a ton after looking back through the recordings, I think this was a super fun concept, and if I'm feeling crazy, I might try it again in the future. To be honest, there aren't that many more games I think I could do this in, but if you have any ideas as to what I should try out, be sure to leave a comment down below as it really helps out my channel. Also, if you've never checked out my Twitch channel, I hope this serves as an incentive to do that, as I have a ton of videos I'll be doing live on stream that I'm sure you'd love if you made it this far in the video. If you're interested, check the description and drop a follow over there so you always know when I go live, and maybe use your free Twitch Prime sub if you have one. As always, be sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe for future uploads, as I have a lot more planned for the next few months. Other than that, thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.